Hello, welcome back to 10 at 10. My name is Michael Ramage. I'm the director of the Cyber Education Research Center here at Murray State University, and welcome back to 10 at 10. 10 at 10 is brought to you through a partnership between Murray State University, Grow West, the Technology Council of West Kentucky, KY Innovation, and local partner Sprocket Innovation in Paducah, and the Kentucky Innovation Station in Madisonville. So it feels like forever ago that we started this. Actually, let me start off with this is episode 161. Forgot that part. But a few weeks ago, we started looking at the 5 basic cybersecurity tips as we start the third season of our fourth season, or fourth year. I guess they're not really seasons, but the fourth year of 10 at 10. I wanted to start back with the basics. So we started off by looking at creating cybersecurity policy. Today, we're going to talk about passwords and how to improve your passwords. And let me give the caveat before we really get going. I talk about passwords a lot. I talk about passwords. We're going to talk about password vaults. We're going to talk about two-factor authentication. We're going to do all this in less than 10 minutes. So if you have a group that you would like for me to talk to about this, I'm happy to do so. I can get into more detail about examples of good passwords, strong passwords, weak passwords, kind of the way that I go about it and all of that, because I really can't get into all of that in the amount of time that we have. But I do want to start off by talking about things that we need to do to improve our password. Frankly, the human element, which we'll talk about next time, and passwords. Passwords is probably the thing that is the easiest for us to do, but the one that we don't want to do the most. And what I mean by that is, well, let me just get into the tips. Is make your passwords, passphrases, long, complex passwords. We don't want long passwords because they get harder for us to remember. The new guidance out is that it doesn't have to be complex anymore. Complex meaning uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special characters. As long as it's long. If it's 16 characters long, using just letters, that's better than an 8-character password that's complex. The length is really important. But it also can't be, the first line of the preamble of the Constitution, because everybody knows that's a phrase that people could use. It can't be the most popular quote ever. But again, because that's something that people might think about using. So if it is something that you can remember that is unique, that's even better. So maybe truck, table, beach, blue. Those words mean nothing together. I don't know how long that is either. But when you combine them, it's something that maybe you can remember, and it's long, it's complex enough. It's not doesn't have complexity like numbers, letters, and special characters, but it's long enough that it would be hard for an attacker to break. But here's the catch. You can't reuse it. You can't reuse it. And often I'll go through a process to show why a unique password is important. So I'll probably do that on a later episode. But here's the point. Last week we talked about, I don't remember the number, several billion records being stolen. It was the database of compromised databases. The breach of, it was the mother of all breaches, I think is what it called it. And in that, I am certain that there were a large number of username and passwords that got compromised. And every time there was a username and password compromised, if that password is the same password that you're still using, then the password that you're still using is no longer safe. That's the point, is that every time a password gets breached, everywhere else that password's being used is no longer safe. Because the first thing the attacker does is, one, if they can figure out the password, they'll use the password username combination. So, okay, one place my username is my email, and another place it's a username. Well, is that username the same as your email? Is it your first name dot your last name? Is it your first name middle initial? There's a lot of combinations that are simple for usernames because frankly usernames aren't intended to be kept private. It's the password that's the key. It's the password that is being used for authentication. So do not reuse passwords. And we can go into more details. You can ask me offline, and I'll explain to you why passwords are so important to be unique. But they should be unique. And here's the catch. If you have a long, unique password, the guidance now is you don't have to change it. You don't have to change it unless it's part of a data breach. If your password has been stolen, even if it's the hashed version of that, if your password has been part of a database or a data breach, then you need to change it. Otherwise, you don't have to change it anymore. So we can, if we have a strong password, then we can keep it a little bit longer. So that's good. Use a password manager. Password vault is what I called it earlier, and use two-factor authentication. Well, let's look at both of those a little bit more. First, password vaults. This is not my password vault, just for the record. I have hundreds of passwords that I try to remember. No, I can't remember those passwords. I have a password vault that securely keeps my passwords. Now, yes, I have to remember a password, and the screen as I look at the screen, it's on the left. You have to put in your master password to get to all your other passwords. Assuming you don't forget that password, then all of your other passwords are in one spot. You don't have to remember all 200, 300, 400 passwords. You just have to remember one. Now, maybe you need to remember your login password and your password vault password. That's fine. Okay, now you got two. But it's not a matter of having to remember all of these. Now, I often get the question, well, Chrome will save it, or Safari will save it, or Apple will save it. Is that okay to use? Here's the truth. If there's better ways to do it than using your browser, that for sure. But I would much rather you do that than reuse passwords. I would much rather you use the password or the security built into your operating system on your computer than to reuse passwords. Absolutely. I would rather you store them somewhere that's not even secure than to reuse passwords. Because if you work in an environment where there's hundreds of people around you all the time, then that's a different discussion. But if you're using a computer at home, then for that password to be stolen, somebody's going to, if you're writing it down on a piece of paper, then somebody's going to break into your house. And the odds of somebody breaking into your house are lower. It's not zero. There's a risk of that, but are less than somebody breaking in online through a website to steal your credentials. So yes, store them securely, but use a password vault, use a password manager. It'll certainly save you in the long run. And then finally, use two-factor authentication. Facebook, Google, Twitter, or X, your bank, most organizations now have the ability to incorporate two-factor authentication. So what does that mean? That means that once I log in with my password, if I successfully log in with my password, then it's going to send a message to my phone. And my phone's going to say, here's a code. And then you have to go back and put that code in. Or it's going to say, verify this is you. And you click a button to verify that it's you. The catch with this is that if they steal my password, they would also have to steal my phone to be able to get into my account. I'm not worried about somebody. I am worried a little bit. There's a risk, but I am more worried about a person in Eastern European or in China or in Russia to steal my password than I am somebody in the office next to me. So if you're in China and you steal my password, then you're also going to have my phone, to log into my account. Is it impossible? No, because you can fake that, but it's much harder, much more sophisticated, and the chances of that are much lower. But let me finish with this, and I'm over on time. I knew I would be because there's a lot I wanted to get through. Two-factor authentication trusts that you are aware of what's going on with your account, and you should be. But if you get a two-factor authentication notice, hey, did you just log in from a computer in Moscow, and you didn't just log into a computer from Moscow, then don't click yes. We're using two-factor authentication a lot, and people are using it so much that we're just accepting what it tells us. We can't just accept what it tells us. We have to be aware of the context. If we're not on our computer, if we're not logging into a system, then why did we get that alert? Don't just assume it's okay. Say no if it's not. Don't accept all requests. All right, I'll stop there. We'll get into user education next week, and maybe next week we'll talk about news, and maybe we'll get into more of this discussion as well. Thank you for joining 10 at 10. We appreciate it, and I'll see you next week back here on 10 at 10. Thank you. Goodbye.